Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 1705 of the series. Today is the last bit of Wittgenstein, mind reading and perception by the Honorable Edmund Dain. I will continue to read where I left off, page 687. And I'm having my webcam with me, so please remind me when we finish off. Last time we went into it, which I thought was very interesting, a sort of discussion in the discussion. And the first discussion was between Gordon Baker and the philosopher Ian Hacking. Ian Hacking had one view that was opposed by Baker, although they started out as cooperating for a new view of Wittgenstein, the neo-Wittgensteinians, if you like. But then they took different turns. And it's about explanations and what rules are. We come to the conclusion that there are no general rules of grammar. The grammar that Wittgenstein is pointing to is not general, not the universal Chomskyan grammar at all. It's a particular, in certain context only. The purpose of Wittgenstein's purpose is description, not explanation. And the central role that Hacker takes grammar to have is far from what is actually happening in the writings of Wittgenstein. Language doesn't follow strict rules, and neither does learning of language. But at certain specific instances, grammar of some sort will turn up. And that's a lovely side. Thank you, Kalle. Baker holds that Wittgenstein does not address general philosophical problems or views at all. Rather, Wittgenstein addresses problems that are essentially person-relative, centering on the dynamics of somebody's thinking, not on the geometry of thoughts. And mostly, I would say also, Wittgenstein is addressing specific problems, not on a general basis. I think you can compare that and that would be pretty accurate to say that philosophy is in itself a tendency to speak in general. There is an expression in Swedish, pointing with the whole hand, often done by officers in the military. Showing things broadly, that's the purpose of philosophy. And then it's more a matter in the direction of explanations than descriptions. I think you can get that feel that descriptions are more punctual, they are less general, less universal. They only work in a certain point. Like the expression, when I look in front of me, I see a tree. Well, that wouldn't work if I moved myself 5 meters, or wouldn't work inside a house, and so on. It's a description with an explanation in much more cases, not all cases, but in more cases, for truth. We can continue where I left off. It's the penultimate paragraph on page 687. And I will read the last remark to get a flow in it. I'm sorry if I ended a bit too late last time, I think. But remembering, I will start with the sight. But remembering, no, it's a bit down. Last sight. But remembering the meaning in which we learn to use the word see. We certainly say we see this human being, this flower, while our optical picture the colors and shapes is continually altering, and within the widest limits at that. Now that is just how we do use the word see. These remarks are not general rules for the uses of words, and they are not merely comparisons aimed at serving as correctives. They are simple descriptions that capture accurately certain aspects of grammar that we may need to be reminded of. In response to the first two questions, Van Baker and Hacker are both right and wrong. Wittgenstein does not think that we can, in general, capture the grammar of our language unproblematically by means of general grammatical rules. But we can use language games that do follow such rules to bring out some aspect of grammar. And we can also describe aspects of grammar more directly too. That leaves the third question about the nature of problems Wittgenstein responds to. Here again, Baker and Hacker are both right and wrong. Wittgenstein does respond to general problems and views in philosophy, but he takes those problems and views to be product of confusions shared by many individuals. Responding to such confusions successfully in any given case depends upon the individual concerned accepting our diagnosis of the source of their problem. But those sources are general insofar as they lie in our language and language sets the same traps for everyone. Ten. Concluding remarks. Wittgenstein is often claimed to hold that we can explain mind reading in terms of perception. But I have argued that Wittgenstein's position is quite different. When Wittgenstein says that we can see emotion or that we can see the fear or fury on another's face, he is not proposing an explanation of mind reading. Wittgenstein's aim in these remarks is simply to remind us of the concepts that we use, the kind of contrasts we make between them, and the differing phenomenology that accompanies them. Moreover, Wittgenstein denies that any explanation of the process involved in mind reading could show our use of words such as seeing in this context to be justified or unjustified. Whatever process we might discover is involved here would not have the consequences we tend to assume it would. Instead, Wittgenstein investigates the concept of seeing involved in seeing others' thoughts and feelings. By investigating the use we make of the term seeing in this context. There, Wittgenstein claims we find both similarities and differences with what we call seeing elsewhere. Can we then perceive others' thoughts and feelings according to Wittgenstein? The answer is both yes and no. But what matters is not that we can or cannot, but the sense in which we can or cannot. And we discover what that sense is by investigating the grammar of the concept involved. Wittgenstein's aim is to describe that grammar with a view to overcoming our resistance to the idea that this could be a form of seeing, while acknowledging the differences that provoke that resistance in the first place. Wittgenstein then has much to contribute to our understanding of mind reading. But what he has to contribute is nothing like the view typically attributed to him. Since that view is often taken to constitute an important similarity between Wittgenstein's thought and that of Husserl and Merleau-Ponty. One consequence is that we must rethink that relationship. I have argued that the significance of Wittgenstein's thought here does not lie in his providing an explanation of mind reading, but in his descriptions of the relevant concepts. And whether that means Wittgenstein's thought is further away from the phenomenology of Husserl and Merleau-Ponty, or closer to it, also depends on how well the thought of Husserl and Merleau-Ponty, which likewise aspires to be descriptive rather than explanatory, is represented by contemporary theorists who want to use their work to confront head-on contemporary views in philosophy of mind and cognitive science. I think we will hold the summary to reading the next Dain article, because there are not that much new in the red thing from the lecture 1701. So let's start a bit with a new one, also by the same author, Edmund Dain. So we are into the next article, same author, and we are now looking to an attitude towards the soul. Wittgenstein, Other Minds, and the Mind. By Edmund Dain. Don't ask what goes in us when we are certain that, but how is the certainty that this is so? Indeed, it is the right paper. We can make a little bit smaller since type is rather big here. We can have the text up a bit. And maybe to 175%.
Hello, is this the right paper?
Yes, it's correct.
Great. This is also from 2019, as far as I understood it.
Yes, 2019, and you can make it a little bit smaller since the
Yes,
typesetting
absolutely.
is bigger.
Yes. 175 or perhaps 150.
Yeah, I think 175. Try that.
It's in too big because the font is really huge here.
Okay. Well, we start out with that and we can change later. Thank you very much. I'll repeat the quote from Wittgenstein. Don't ask what goes on in us when we are certain that, but how the certainty that this is so manifested in people's action. Abstract. My focus here is on the problem of other minds. And on the question about what is involved in believing that other people have minds. And that the real problem lies in trying to justify that belief. By contrast, I argue that we misunderstand what belief in other minds really involves, and that the problem of other minds itself has its source in that misunderstanding. My aim then is to rethink what is involved in belief in other minds. And I do so in terms of what Wittgenstein calls an attitude towards the soul. I argue that this not only shows what is wrong with the problem of other minds, but also has significant consequences for our understanding of what the mind itself is too. One such consequence is that ethical considerations have a much more fundamental role to play in thinking about the mind that is typically thought to be the case. Other minds. My focus in this paper is on the problem of other minds, and specifically on a question about what is involved in believing that other people have minds or souls. Or that they are conscious beings and not automata. Insofar as we can correctly be said to believe that at all. I shall try to use that question not only as means of showing what is wrong with the traditional problem of other minds itself, or part of what is wrong with that anyway, but also as means of saying something about what it is to have a mind, and so about what the mind is or is not as well. My aim will be to develop an account of what believing in other minds involves in terms of what Wittgenstein calls in part 2 of the philosophical investigations, our having an attitude towards a soul. And to contrast the picture of what the mind is that is involved in that account with a picture that lies behind the problem of other minds. The problem. We tend, I think, to take it for granted that we know what is involved in believing in other minds. Isn't it just that we have a belief, the belief that other people have minds? What could be simpler than that? Why should we think that there is a question about what is involved in believing in other minds that needs to be addressed at all? One way to bring out the difficulty here is to look at the ways in which the belief that someone, a specific individual, has a mind, whatever exactly that might involve, differs from other beliefs we might have about someone. Such as the belief that they are in pain or that they are suffering in some way. Wittgenstein invites us to make this kind of comparison when he writes as follows. I believe that he is suffering. Do I also believe that he isn't an automaton? Only reluctantly could I use the word in both contexts. So why might one be reluctant to use the same word belief in both of these contexts as Wittgenstein says he would be? What are the differences meant to be here that would lead one to hesitate to do so? Suppose I believe that a colleague of mine is suffering in some way. She's rubbing her temples, groaning and complaining of a headache. In such a case, I may well come to believe that my colleague is suffering. I form that belief quite explicitly at some point during my encounter with her. I form it on the basis of certain evidence, such as her rubbing her temples and complaining of headache, and that evidence might be good or it might be bad. Moreover, I could tell others who know her that she is suffering, and in doing so, I might potentially be informing them of something that they did not know, and I could explain to them what the evidence is for my belief as well if they were to ask. In the case of believing in other minds, things seem to be very different. It is not that whereas I am willing to entertain the possibility that my colleague might not be suffering at all, I am certain that she has a mind in the sense that my evidence in this case is especially good. Say, and therefore I am not really willing to entertain the possibility of being wrong here at all. It is not a matter of the strength or the surety of my belief at all. It is not, as Wittgenstein puts it, that I merely believe that so and so is suffering, but I'm certain that he is not an automaton. Rather, in the case of believing in other minds, each of the features of my belief that my colleague is suffering, noted above, seems to be missing. I do not believe that she has a mind in the sense in which I believe that she is suffering. Not because I do not know her well enough yet, but because there is no point during my encounters with her however well I may come to know her, when I explicitly form such a belief. It is not that I start out not believing that she has a mind, and then at some point form the belief that she does. And since I do not form such a belief in that way at all, I do not form such a belief on the basis of certain evidence that I come by during my encounters with her. evidence that might be good or might be bad. Again, I do not start out not believing that my colleague has a mind, and then seeing her rubbing her temples, perhaps conclude that given that she has a headache, say, she must have a mind to have an ache in after all. Relatedly, that my colleague has a mind does not seem to be something I could potentially inform someone of. However little they knew her. Each of these differences seems in some sense to be connected to two further differences between believing of someone so and so that they are suffering, and believing of them that they have a mind. First, whereas it is intelligible that my colleague is not actually suffering, the idea that she might not have a mind is not. My colleague is, as it were, not the kind of thing that might not have a mind. Whereas my colleague could still be my colleague and not suffering. Viewing her as not having a mind would be to view her not as someone at all, but as something. It would involve a radical transformation in the kind of thing that the belief was a belief about. Second, in contrast to my belief that my colleagues say is suffering, which is a belief about a specific person, it is not clear that my believing in other minds involves believing in something or a specific individual in the same kind of way at all. Insofar as I can be said to believe in other minds, my belief seems rather to be about everyone and about no one. It is about no one in the sense that it does not seem to be something I believe about any particular individual, however well or however little I know of them, not my children, not my parents, not the greengrocer, the sales assistants, the passer by in the street, or the students in my class. And it is about everyone in the sense that it seems already to be part of whatever it is to think of someone, as a human being at all. To view someone as someone at all just seems already to view them as having a mind. And there I put a stop. Could we hold on that page just for a second? Because I want to put a little mark where I left off. Thank you very much. Well, let me just start here to introducing you to this, I would say, very difficult subject. And I think the first sense you get, is this really important? Isn't this a peculiar, specific question that doesn't have a proper place? Should it even be brought into a subject? Well, let's start with philosophy. This is a major question within philosophy. Maybe one of the biggest ones. The Chinese room, for instance, is an example how you would tell that some sort of alien, robot, or human being you don't know is conscious or not. And by having that thing or being or human locked in a room and only being able to communicating through a printer, and whether you can tell that the responses points to that individual, that being conscious or not. If I don't misremember, the Chinese room is brought to attention by John Searle. So it is a big question in philosophy, highly debated. And I would say until at least recently, the absolute majority thought that you could not see if somebody was conscious or not. Could we have it in English, maybe? Oh, it is English, perfect. It was John Searle. It was like 30 years ago. And that's philosophy, but the case is the same in ordinary language. Consciousness is not something we take for granted in people at all. Not at all. I think the vast majority, if not everyone, will think that human beings are, yes, extraordinary, complex beings, but not having a consciousness as such, or having a soul, or having a mind for that matter. And what this article is addressing is an invitation to see the whole thing quite differently. To open up the question and to see that this philosophical standpoint might not be the only one you can hold, or even the case could be that it is mistaken. And once more, of course, we have the question about mishandling or misunderstanding language. I firmly believe that it makes very little sense, if any, to say that you need to have an empirical evidence for someone to be conscious. And Wittgenstein's description of the things will not go hand in hand with John Searle's. Yes, it's true. He makes a sort of linguistic argument that are tough, if I would say almost impossible to get a grip on. I would say today with AI, the belief has become even stronger that it's just a handling of different things. Or as is written here, there's just a syntax or a grammar in the Gödelian way that goes automatically and makes some sort of consciousness. We can go back to the text. And just where we ended, find that again. That's very good. Second. Was built-in feature of to see someone as someone. It is built into the whole thing that creature is with a mind, it's having a mind. It is attached in a way that can't be cut off. That is not to say, as he really closely pointed out, we don't assume consciousness. It is not like, let's see here, page 4, the page before, second paragraph, 5th line. I can read the whole things. Rather, in the case of believing in other minds, each of the features of my belief that my colleague is suffering, noted above, seems to be missing. I do not believe that she has a mind in the sense in which I believe she is suffering. Can you see this? to be suffering. The colleague here is touching her temples, complaining, looking sick. There could be some little aspect of empiricism here. She could be feigning it. Maybe some weird case could even be wrong. A hypochondriac. So you are not as sure. But when it comes to the thing, if she has a mind, that is not a thing that has the possibility of being doubted. And neither is it that you have to know that person for a certain time, like in the Chinese room, where an extended period can give the impression of consciousness. Nor is it assumed from the beginning, as the philosopher and survivor of concentration camps, Frankl, said, or wrote rather, life needs to have a meaning. Livet måste ha en mening. That we need to assume people to have souls in order not to murder others in, for instance, like the concentration camps he himself had suffered in. No. It is already speaking of someone. Mind is already present, and it's inseparable from being a human. And I'm going out on a limb here. It could also be, it wouldn't even make sense to question if someone were conscious or had a mind. It wouldn't even make sense. So suffering, having a headache, and having a mind is not the same. And here's another pointer. They use the same have. I have a mind, I have a headache. There is a superficial grammatical semblance. And as Wittgenstein often says, is the similarity that tricks us. And sometimes the similarities are incredible, almost identical. And I'd say, this is my very private take here, I'd say most people say it's the same thing to say I have a mind, I have a headache. And it's something external to me to have a mind. Well, it's way too long this. Kalle, jump in and comment, please.
Yes, in this paper, the second paper by Dain, Another to us all, one keyword is automaton, I believe. Do you hear me correctly? Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear. I was thinking.
Yes. So automaton, we could say it's pre-computers is Wittgenstein was contemporary with Turing, but it was still too early. Wittgenstein passed away in 1951, so he didn't know about computers, but they were perhaps the early stage computers. We could today perhaps say, I also believe that isn't a computer or a zombie. We have the word automaton here 16 times in this paper by Dain. But I don't know, today if you neurologists would perhaps not be so certain that people are not no longer automata, as in Wittgenstein's time. But we are exaggerating now today. Healthy people are of course not automata. And to return perhaps to Chinese room, which is very interesting, we have in the past discussed Hubert Dreyfus.
Yes.
He Heidegger
Good old Dreyfus, hubby.
yes, the Heidegger fanatist. Heidegger was his name. Heidegger. So he wrote actually a book about this. Let me see. This 92, what computer still can't do. A critique of artificial reason. So he was early on, because he was complaining that people around 92 believed that computers were superior to human beings. So he was addressed this question. And then let's see. So this is what many people believe today. However, for those who accept that Searle's actions stimulate the mind, separate from his own, the important question is not what the symbols mean to Searle. What is important is what they mean to the virtual mind. While Searle is trapped in the room, the virtual mind is not. It is connected to the outside world through the Chinese speakers it speaks to, through the programmers who gave it to world knowledge, and through the cameras and other sensors that robotists can supply. This affirmation, this analysis, this paragraph, I think, has great and dangerous implications.
Yes, how good can it? Great and dangerous implications at the same time. Yeah.
So, so we know, for instance, from quantum physics, the Nobel Prize from last year, 2022, that quantum physics has shown that what should we say? That the room, we are not trapped in a room. Instead, what do you say? There is the geographical. There are no geographical limitations, as we believe, as stated in this. There is no, what we call it, local reality.
No.
So this paragraph advocates for a local reality, but the quantum physics Nobel Prize shows that a local reality, rather the computer is rather trapped in a room. Or in a so to say, in a space, because it cannot move, and we know that intelligence is in the body. So what would you say, Hans, about this?
Yeah, I agree. We're not sort of strapped to a confined room, and I think there is another aspect of this example, because I remember when I read about it. So sort of a Searle, as you say, he has the disconnectedness, which is weird in itself. I did not reflect about that in that time. I did not understand it as you did now, as you explain now. But the second thing is he puts everything up as presenting that virtual mind and inside the box as being identical to something conscious. And then I get the feeling that Searle still wants to keep the mind, but he's pretty much done it for himself. He's sort of painted himself into a corner, and he tries to put some ad hocs and say the computer doesn't understand what it's saying, but there's no escape once he'd done the mistake. And that is actually constructed, as you say, by having a secluded, like a piece of space that is not connected to the rest of reality, which is an impossibility.
And we could call Searle armchair professor. Here it applies quite literally. And Searle thinks that real intelligence is being an armchair professor.
Yeah.
So he I think that Church thinks that the computer is a extended arm of himself.
Yeah.
But still, his critics say that the computer is actually is all everywhere at the same time.
Everywhere, yeah. It's everywhere.
But
Very good, Kalle. Very good.
But being everywhere, but it's like the concepts of panopticon. It's not real. You cannot. Okay, of course, the computers have big power. If you, let's say, you have a computer attached to a nuclear bomb, of course, computers can have big power, but they don't have real intelligence.
No.
For several reasons. One is this thing that we have discussed in the past, the hand argument. What is the keyword for that? The left. So if an alien would see a left hand in the space, it wouldn't be able to distinguish between a left hand and a right hand.
No.
What was the name of that
again? Osma problem by Ava Gardner. That's the one.
Eva Gardner. Let me see. Let's remind us. Okay, we are now going a little
Osma problem. O-Z-M-A.
Let me see. Google is a bit slow here. Doesn't move. Let me see. Apologize. The Wi-Fi doesn't. Okay, let me see. So we could say that the Osma problem still holds. The argument still holds.
Yes, and I read the other day, I don't know if it was Wikipedia, that the Osma problem doesn't hold. But no, but it's not that easy. I say the Osma problem still holds without a doubt. Still holds.
While we could compare it to Chinese room, most people think that the Chinese room holds. While we would say, and some Wittgenstein would probably also say that it doesn't hold. Or
no, yeah, isn't it interesting?
Osma problem. I don't remember how to. Yes. Let me see. Let me say I don't know. This is Amtrix Universe. I don't know if I should go to this page. It's perhaps not the best one. Amtrix Universe is a popular science book by Martin Gardner, covering aspects of blah 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 blah. Let me see. Go to there. The Osma problem here. Okay, I could read quickly, or should be skipped. I don't know. Let me see. The Osma, perhaps that's the key point. I don't know if this is good either. About the hand, we need to find the piece about the hand. Let me see.
Could I suggest something, Kalle? Because this is so interesting. The next time we do Wittgenstein, I don't know if it's going to happen today, we can bring in the Osma problem, because then we can find all the right links and everything. So we have some time for the next lecture today.
Absolutely. So let's end there, perhaps.
Well, I thank you very much for this go through with the new article by Edmund Dain. You have a pleasant morning, day, afternoon, or evening, night, wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.